Hello, buddy. Welcome back to Tin Man Square Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm kicking off my new Shining Gold Tales marathon for you guys. And the first video I'm reacting to is 3 scary McDonald's horror stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road in the bag, shall we? Okay, here we go.
My eyes were glued to the road. I had been driving since the crack of dawn, and now the sun was beginning to set.
Okay.
All of my worldly possessions were packed so high in my tiny hatchback car that I couldn't see out the back window. Making it all fit was like a real-life game of Tetris, but I needed to make it work because I could never go back. Let's just say I was looking for a new beginning, a new life. I'm a 28-year-old female, so traveling alone at night can be dangerous.
Oh yeah, that would be dangerous if you're just traveling alone on a highway by yourself, and people can take advantage of that and try to lure girls to go with them. But it would be kind of dangerous packing all your stuff inside your car and you can't even see out the back window because you got to see who's driving right behind you and to make sure you see them merge to another lane, stuff like that. But anyway, let's continue on with this girl story and see what happens next.
Especially on remote spans of highway like this. Rest stops were few and far between, and there was almost nobody else on the road. That's why I was relieved to see a sign for a McDonald's 2 kilometers ahead. I don't particularly like the food, but something was drawing me to this place. I couldn't resist. I would get a coffee at least. As the bright red and yellow lights appeared over the horizon, I was struck by how alone it was. There was nothing else for miles in either direction, and only empty fields surrounding the highway. I drove towards the restaurant and chose a spot away from any of the lamp posts that dotted the empty parking lot. The sliding doors opened as I approached the front entrance. I looked around and smiled when I noticed that the large dining area was deserted. I was the only one there, apart from the single employee behind the counter. He was about 45 years old, slightly overweight, had a scruffy beard. His green teeth seemed to glow under the bright fluorescent lights. I don't think he even noticed me until I was standing right in front of the counter.
"Oh, hi. What can I get you?"
He stammered. "Just a coffee, please," I said.
"Sure thing. I'll have to put on a new pot. Do you have time to wait?"
He asked. "No problem. There's no rush."
"So, what's a pretty lady like you doing alone in the middle of nowhere?"
He leaned over the counter towards me. I gave him a quick rundown of my situation. I told him I was seeking a new life and that I could never return to where I was. Just then, his demeanor changed. He leaned further over the counter and said,
"You know, the coffee might take a while. Why don't you come to the back with me while we wait?"
Oh, hey, no, If he's got greenish looking teeth, that tells you he ain't cared about his personal hygiene. And two, he's basically a potential sex-starved maniac.
His breath seemed to rot the inside of my nose. "Okay, let's go," I said, giving him a seductive wink. He seemed surprised, like he was expecting a rejection. This was probably the first time that line got anything other than a disgusted scowl or a slap across the face. The surprised look on his face wore off, and he said,
Okay. Follow me."
I clutched my purse as we walked into the storage room. The door slammed behind us, and I locked it. I turned around to see the man standing there with an excited grin. Tension rose in that room when he noticed the icy expression on my face. His excited smile turned into a disappointed glare. It's amazing how much you can communicate without saying a word. You'd think I just killed his dog, but I wouldn't be killing any dogs. Not today.
"What's going on here?"
He pleaded. I didn't say a word, just reached slowly into my purse and pulled out a large butcher's knife, looking right at him. That must have been enough to answer his question. If anyone else was in the restaurant, they surely would have heard screaming, but we were all alone. When I was done with him, I left the room and poured myself a coffee, taking time to savor the moment. Walking back to my car, I made a mental note that this was one more place to which I can never return.
He probably wanted to take her in the back room just to do some naughty things with her, probably. But then once he noticed that expression on her face, he kind of changed his mind on that, like he's about to do something else. But luckily, she had some sort of a weapon on hand and scared the crap out of him. And poured her coffee and got out of there. But that is really scary. I would have been calling the number of their manager and telling them about what that employee was doing and see if they could get him fired for taking a customer in the back room. That's uncalled for.
I had been working at McDonald's for a few years. I took the job while I was still in high school, and after graduation, it still seemed like the best option, so I stayed. It wasn't the most exciting work in the world, but my manager and coworkers were great.
I know there's a lot of people that don't like to work at a McDonald's or any other fast food joint, but hey, at least you're getting paid something. And it's just probably temporary until you can find something else. And plus, McDonald's has that thing where you work for them, they help you pay for college too. So that's always a good bonus.
Because of that, I've always enjoyed it. The only real problem was the pay. I'd been having a hard time keeping up with my bills, and I needed a way to make some extra money. One day, I noticed a job posting for the night shift at a different location across town. My current location closed at 11 p.m., so it was not an option for me without switching. The night shift pay was almost double what I was currently getting, so it was too good to pass up.
You find a job listed for another McDonald's and you get paid more, you better take it. If not, you could be stuck at your McDonald's location and hardly getting paid anything.
I applied, and with the recommendation of my manager, they hired me on the spot. The shift started at 12 a.m. and went until 8 a.m. It was a surprisingly important shift at this restaurant because of its proximity to the highway. A lot of truck drivers would stop for coffee and something to eat on their way to the freeway. In addition to serving customers, this was also an important time to stock the restaurant and get things organized for the day shift when it would be too busy to do things like that. I had one coworker, Greg, who I worked with often. He was around my age, 22 or 23. Thin with a bony face and dark eyes. He was quiet, but we got along well otherwise. Greg would take a lot of smoke breaks, more than average. I was a smoker too, but even I would only take a fraction of the time that he would. I was taking out the garbage and noticed Greg on one of his breaks, but he wasn't smoking. I could see him talking to someone, an older guy in a dirty gray hoodie. I wasn't sure, but I thought I saw the man hand a wad of cash to Greg, and Greg handed him a small plastic bag. It doesn't take a genius to know what was going on there.
Yeah, that Greg guy probably thought that he wasn't making enough money himself that he decided to go into being a drug hustler, sell drugs and get the cash. But man, this person right here needs to be careful because if Greg finds out that you were snooping on him, he'll probably think you're going to tell on him and he'll probably come after you.
I'm not one to judge, and I would have been just as happy to ignore it when Greg shot me a glare. A glare so intense that daggers might as well have been coming out of his eyes. I threw the garbage bag into the dumpster and walked back into the restaurant. When Greg returned from his quote-unquote smoke break, he came up to me and said he'd kill me if I said anything to anyone. Like I said, I would have been just as happy to ignore it, but this threat really rubbed me the wrong way. Looking back, I know I should have called the police right then and there, but hindsight is always 20/20. From then on, Greg and I never said a word to one another, although I would get the occasional glare from him when we crossed paths. Things went on like this for several weeks, and eventually I thought Greg was over it. I thought we had moved on, but I was wrong. Driving home in the morning after my shift, I noticed a car that seemed to be following me. It was a ways back, but I was almost certain that it was Greg. I knew that Greg's place was in the opposite direction as mine, so it was not likely a coincidence that he was behind me.
No, he's probably trying to follow you just so he knows where you live at and probably sneak in to threaten you more or probably kill you just so you won't decide to go and snitch on him. Man, after he threatened you saying if you tell somebody I would kill you, I would have waited until he was not around and get the manager and tell them what he just said and what he was doing. But let's just see what happens here, shall we?
Not wanting to let him know where I live, I drove to the police station instead. As soon as I pulled into the station, Greg turned around and drove away. I decided not to file a report since nothing really happened that I could prove. Later that week, I was going for a walk in the park near my house and I noticed someone hiding in the bushes, peeking at me. On closer inspection, it was him. Greg was stalking me. By then, I knew what I had to do, so I drove straight to the police station and told them everything. I told them about the drug deal, the car chase, and the incident in the park. The officer did a background check on him, and it turned out that Greg had a criminal record. He was already on parole for breaking into cars a few years back. Therefore, the report was even bigger trouble for him. I never saw Greg again after that. From what I've heard, he did some time for parole violations. Not surprisingly, one of them was for drug possession. He was never charged for the stalking incidents, since I really couldn't prove it. It's a scary thought that there's someone out there with a grudge against me. He'll be free again someday, and I worry that when that happens, he will show up somewhere, and I will have a big problem on my hands.
Well, I hope he don't show back up at that McDonald's. Well, I know they probably wouldn't hire him again after his little incident violating his parole. But I'm just glad that this person did go to the police, because if they didn't, he would have still been stalking and following wherever this other person goes. And if Greg didn't want to get in trouble, he shouldn't have not done the drug deal and threatened that employee. And that's all I got to say.
Ever since I was a young child, I have loved McDonald's. Some people grow out of it, but it's a part of my childhood that I never gave up. There's one restaurant near my house that I visit often. It has a large dining area with more than enough space, even at the busiest times. It also has the most friendly staff of any location that I've been to. I was waiting in line to order when I noticed a new manager behind the counter. He had dark black hair, slicked back with glasses. He looked more like a mafia boss than a McDonald's manager. I didn't think much of it. New people were always coming and going. That's just the way things are in the food service industry. When I reached the front of the line, I was greeted by a familiar face. Carol was one of the longtime employees, and we were on a first-name basis. "Hi, Lester. What will it be?" she asked. "I'll have the usual, quarter-pounder combo with extra pickles," I replied. "No problem," Carol said. I stepped aside to wait for my order. Moments later, Carol brought out a tray with my food. I thanked her and sat down at a table. After my first bite, I noticed that there were no pickles on my burger. Not a big deal. Carol must have forgotten. I walked up to the counter and told her. "Oh, sorry, Lester. Here you go." She handed me a small paper cup of pickles. "No problem. Thanks." I went back to my seat. Just then, the manager walked out from the back with an angry scowl.
"Carol, can I speak to you in the back?"
he grumbled. Okay, sir," she reluctantly agreed. I could hear him yelling at her. Rather inappropriate for a few pickles, I thought. Although I don't like to see someone being treated like that, I decided it was none of my business. After I was done with my food, I cleared my tray and left. The next day, I walked into the restaurant, and as soon as I did, something struck me as strange. The vibe was off. Carol was behind the counter, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She had large bags under her bloodshot eyes. Her normally cheerful and upbeat demeanor was gone. Her movements seemed lethargic and forced. That new manager stood behind her, overlooking the staff like a drill sergeant. That guy must be a real jerk, I thought to myself. Not liking what I saw, I left. The next night, I was out late with some friends. We were at a new bar downtown until around 2 a.m. I'm a great dancer, and my friends were super impressed with my hot dance moves. It was my turn to drive, so I couldn't drink. Once I dropped everyone off, my car passed the McDonald's. It was around 2:45 a.m. by then, so it should have been closed, but I could tell that the lights were on. I was concerned enough to check it out, so I pulled my car into the parking lot and walked to one of the lit windows. What I saw will give me nightmares forever. I saw that manager standing in the middle of the room while Carol and the other employees were down on their hands and knees scrubbing the floor. He was forcing them to work all night. This can't be legal, I thought to myself. As he turned, I could see that he was holding a gun. Stunned by what I saw, I ran back to my car and drove straight to the police station. The officer thought I was playing a joke when I told him my story. However, when the police checked on the restaurant, they found the scene exactly as I described it to them. Some time has passed since then, and I heard that the manager was not only fired, but also charged with kidnapping, because he would not let the employees leave. That guy gave me a bad feeling from the start, and although I believe it's important not to judge a book by its cover, it's also important to follow your intuition. There's no telling how far he would have gone if I hadn't stopped there that night, and I think it's a good thing that we never found out.
Oh, hell no. That wouldn't fly with me. If I heard a manager yelling at an employee while I'm eating food and everybody else is like listening in to what they're saying, I don't care if he gets mad with me, I'm going to get up and say something. Be like, if you want to yell at the employee, do it a little bit more quieter. Everybody else out here can hear you. It's bad that he's forcing his employees to the floor while they're on their knees, and he's holding a gun to them, like holding them hostage. Man, that guy is really insane. But thankfully, the police believed him and went over there to arrest him. If that McDonald's still had him on as a manager, then nobody don't want to work there with him. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more shiny gold tails reactions like this. This has been another successful installment of Tin Man's Quarter Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap, and have a nice day, y'all.